going on, party people? It's your friendly neighborhood youth pastor, and we are in a series called Jesus Is. This is lesson 4, and it's going to be broken up into 2 parts, so this is part 1. We're talking about how Jesus is better than a best friend. So I was thinking about my best friend, Mark, and I was thinking about the times when he's been a best friend to me. And one of those times were when I was in like college, university age, I was at this party and, I was doing some stuff that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And so I was at that party, having a good time, when all of a sudden my friend Mark comes and he sees me and he sees what I have in my hand. He grabs that cup and he's like, "What are you doing, guy?" And he's like, "Yo, you crazy?" And, we just got into this thing, but he's like, he just took it. And he prevented me from making probably what would have been a really big mistake. And in that moment, I saw what true friendship looks like. And I hope you've had that experience as well. And Mark isn't perfect. I'm not saying that we in our friendship, we get it right all the time. But it was like a moment like that where I really saw what true friendship is and what it could look like. So we get a glimpse of what friendship can look like when we look at movies or books or TV or wherever. But even those friendships aren't perfect. The reality is that our friends aren't perfect. And if we're honest, we're not perfect friends either. However, when you think about God, God is perfect. And in Jesus is the perfect friend to us. And I experienced God as a friend in my life, guiding me when I was on this journey figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And so I had been speaking at this retreat, and there was this old Chinese man at retreat. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm black. But there was this old Chinese man at the retreat, and he kept saying, "Oh, you need to take my key and go to my condo, and I'm not using it. I'm a doctor. I'm so busy." And I'm like, "Okay, random old Chinese man, sure." But he kept saying it until finally I was like, my favorite price is free. So I'm like, okay, fine. And like by the end of the retreat, I told my story, and he could tell that I was really wrestling with what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So long story short, I went to that cottage. I had a silent retreat by myself. And it was really at that retreat that I felt God speaking to me. I felt Jesus saying to me, youth ministry is what I want you to do. And so that was when I really decided I'm going to be a youth pastor, and Lord willing, I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. That was 13 years ago, over 13 years ago. And so I went home from that retreat, and at that time we used to have like phones that were plugged into the wall and answering machines. I know you have no clue what I'm talking about, but bear with me. So I went home, deciding in my heart that I really wanted to be a youth pastor, and there was an answering machine message from Pastor Andrew, who's the lead pastor of Cornerstone. And he said, "There is a job for you here at Cornerstone if you're interested." And so for me, I really felt in that moment that Jesus was like a best friend to me. Like Jesus spoke to me in a way that I could hear and understand. And it all worked out. And 13 years later, at the time of this recording, I'm still youth pastoring at Cornerstone. I don't know if you've ever felt close to Jesus like that, like you felt like he's been a best friend. But as we look at this passage that we're going to look at today, this is another story about Jesus and the disciples. But I want you to get out a piece of pen and a paper, and I want you to write down some of the things that you see Jesus doing that shows that he's even better than a best friend. Jesus is a best friend, but Jesus is even better than a best friend. So we're going to take a look at a passage from the Bible. Want to hear it? Here I go. Hey, where'd this Bible come from? All right, so today we're looking at Matthew chapter 14, and it's verses 28 to 31. Matthew 14, 28 to 31. So this is a story about Jesus walking on the water in the storm. So the disciples have gotten in the boat, and they're on their way. Jesus didn't get on the boat. He was dealing with some stuff. And then late in the night, he comes walking to them on the water. All right, check it out. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they say, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." We're going to stop there. All right, so we're going to take an important commercial break. So it might seem crazy to have Jesus and Peter walking on the water. So let's look at that for a sec. So Jesus, who is God, is obviously doing a miracle, and he's walking on the water. But Peter, some people say, oh, Peter didn't have faith because he was starting to sink and stuff like that. But Peter actually showed a tremendous amount of faith because he was the one who got out of the boat and walked towards Jesus. Someone once said, if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. All right, so Peter shows this faith, but then he starts to sink. He gets afraid. He took his eyes off Jesus, and then he started to sink. Okay, so I know that we all have to go through stuff, and we're not going to walk on water, but we're going to have to walk through difficult circumstances. My little challenge to you is to keep your eyes on Jesus, because when you take your eyes off Jesus and look at your circumstances, that's when you start to sink. So that's my little commercial break, but this is a lesson about Jesus and how Jesus is better than a best friend. So let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. So you have Jesus walking towards Peter, but then you have Jesus inviting Peter to walk towards him. So think about how that makes Jesus a good friend. Unfortunately, Peter starts freaking out because he realizes that he's on water. So he takes his eyes off Jesus. He starts to sink. We said that before. And Jesus immediately saves him. How does that make Jesus a good friend? And what we see Jesus do so much in this passage is he invites, he includes, and he welcomes Peter. He encourages Peter. He helps Peter. He supports Peter, and he challenges Peter. So let's think about this challenging part for a sec. Because Jesus knows that it's not only his job to save Peter, it's also his job to make Peter a better person. And I want you to note the timing of when Jesus challenges Peter. He doesn't challenge Peter while he's sinking. Now, imagine if Peter's sinking, I'm so afraid I'm sinking. And Jesus is saying to him, oh, you have little faith. Why don't you trust in me, right? That wouldn't be the best timing. So Jesus reaches out his hand, he saves Peter, and then after he challenges Peter. You get that? When Peter was in need, Jesus wasn't cruel or insensitive. But unfortunately, if we're honest, that's the kind of thing we may have experienced from some of our friends. When we're going through something, maybe they didn't react in the best way. Or maybe we were the ones who had a friend going through something, and when we look back, we're like, you know what? I missed the mark. I didn't handle this in the best way. In our next video, we'll continue to look at this, as well as Jesus' final thoughts to his disciples. So who is Jesus? In his own words, and in this story, we see that Jesus is better than a best friend. That's our time for today. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. See you next time.